of this bhajan. So when we sing this bhajan, we try and get a glimpse of how the spiritual world is, where Krishna permanently resides with all his pure devotees and is engaged in pastimes regularly, uh, in exchanging uh, activities in pleasure with each other. So we'll sing Jai Radha Madhava. All of you are familiar with the verse. Jai Radha Madhava, Jai Radha Madhava, Jai Kunja Bihari, Jai Radha Madhava, Jai Kunja Bihari, Jai Gopi Vallabha, Jai Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Vallabha, Jai Girivaradhari, Jai Radha Madhava, Jai Kunja Bihari, Gopi Vallabha, Jai Girivaradhari, Jai Radha Madhava,
Abang kan aku?
Jai Kunja Bihari, Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana, Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana, Yashodanandana Raja Janaranjana, Yamunatiravanachari, Yakunja Vihari, Yamunatiravanachari, Kunja Vihari, Jai Radha Madhava, Jai Kunja Vihari, Gopi Vallabha, Jai Girivaradhari, Jai Radha Madhava, Jai Kunja Vihari, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Rama, Hare Hare, Jayo Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Radha Radha Madhava, Radha Madhava, Radha Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora, Hari Nitai Gora, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gora, Hari Shri Radha Madhava ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Itai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna. So we're reading from the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, verse number 29. All of you, if you have access to the Gita, you can take time to get to the verse. We'll try and read the translation and the purport as well. It's not so long. It'll help our understanding. So before we get into the reading, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. So today we're reading from the 5th chapter, and it's the last verse of the 5th chapter, and the title of the chapter is Karma Yoga, or Action in Krishna Consciousness. So Prabhupada very kindly has put together a little translation of what the verse really means and how to understand it best. And it gives us a very simple, practical application of how to implement the message of this verse in our lives. So we'll read the verse together. Bhoktaram yagnya tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridam sarvabhutanam gyantva mam shantim rachyati. So this verse from the 5th chapter is also known as the peace verse. Everybody in this world is looking for peace, but we don't really seem to get the formula right of how to really practice a process that is conducive to peace, not just for myself or for yourself, but for everybody, including all living beings, not just humans, but animals, plants, and all other species of life. So this is the peace formula verse given by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and also a practical application of how to understand the message in this verse spoken by Krishna to Arjuna is given in the translation to the verse by Srila Prabhupada. So we'll try and read it's a very important verse, so we'll try and read the translation, starting with the word-to-word meaning. Bhokta Ram, the beneficiary, Yajna of sacrifices, Tapasam, and penances and austerities, Sarvaloka, of all planets and the demigods thereof, Mahaishwaram, the Supreme Lord, Suhridam, the benefactor, Sarva, of all, Bhutanam, the living entities, Gyantva, thus knowing, Mam, me, referring to Lord Krishna, Shantim, relief from material pangs, Rachati, one achieves. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. So This is, as I said, the peace formula verse, and there are essentially three elements that we need to understand to be able to be uh, completely and truly in peace with not just ourselves, but also with our environment, our associates, friends, family, colleagues, etc. So everybody in this world is trying to achieve peace. And everyone's endeavor is to somehow or the other get to a state which is satisfying and supposedly peaceful to the living entity. And that's the nature not of the human beings alone. You can very easily observe that if you were to put a plant at the window ledge, it also tends to grow towards the sunlight. So even a living being or a creature with very limited consciousness also has the understanding and the tendency to be in light, to be in happiness. So what to speak of the animal, the human beings? Even plants also display the propensity or the inclination to be at peace. In fact, even a person who becomes suicidal also approaches the activity of suicide with the understanding that he will possibly be happy in dying as opposed to living. So the ultimate driver for any activity that we are doing nowadays in our day-to-day life is aimed towards achieving that state of peace. But is there really peace that everyone's experiencing? And that's for each one of us to answer for ourselves. Do we have the formula right? Are we doing it in the right way? And if we don't have the right formula, what is the right formula? What is the right process? How do we get this fixed? There is so much endeavor going on in the world today in trying to invest time and effort in the advancement of technology so that it makes it easy for us and supposedly more comfortable, and therefore bring us to a state where we'll possibly be at peace. I was reading a tweet somewhere where someone said, supposedly the mobile phone was invented to save us time. Take a moment to think about it. The mobile phone was invented to save time, but we experience today that we are spending so much time and energy in looking at the mobile's screen that it's unbelievable. And if you analyze the amount of information or the utility, net utility that you're deriving out of looking at a device like a mobile phone and the numerous WhatsApp and tweets and Instagram posts and Facebook notifications and emails and all the other means of sending information to not just bombard your mind constantly, but also to agitate in a way that you think that pursuing that information is potentially going to be peace-giving or might bring you some joy or some satisfaction. But generally, what we observe is the reverse. In fact, technology is washing its hands by giving you a daily, weekly report to say how much time you spent on the screen. But we tend to ignore that. And after a few moments of realization, we somehow or the other switching ourselves on to these weapons of mass uh, destruction, weapons of mass communication, really, that are causing an amazing, unbelievable amount of destruction in our mind. Destruction of thought process, destruction of wavelength, destruction of ideas, and feeding ideas which are supposedly aimed at giving us peace, but not really conducive to uh, uh, the true peace process, which is what Krishna is illustrating here in the Bhagavad Gita. And Arjuna is, for our benefit, asking time and again, he's saying, what is the point? What is the need to engage in this war? And Krishna is explaining to pick up arms and do his duty with the right consciousness. And what is that right consciousness and what is the right understanding is what is elaborated here in this fifth chapter again. There is an interesting story of, I'm sure most of you heard, of a boatman. He's trying to ferry one day, supposedly highly intellectual technology man from one shore to the other. And the technology man is trying to very intelligently read from a magazine or a science magazine and trying to go through the different pages. And the boatman, being a simple person, is a bit puzzled looking at the boatman who is so immersed and focused in the content of the book that he's failing, as per the boatman, to observe the expanse of waters, the movement of the aquatics within it, and the birds above it, the expanse of the sky that tries to reach the end of the waters, the different other boats that are engaged in other activity, transporting, traveling on the waters, and a bright weather sky like we have at this point in time in England. So the simple boatman's view is very different, appreciative of nature, whereas the technology man's view is to absorb information from a science journal with the thought that he probably would educate himself in deriving or devising more different ways and means to be happy. So after a while, the boatman inquires to the technology man as to what is it that he's reading. And the scientist tries to make a mockery of the boatman by asking whether he really knew how science and technology works. And did he know how mobile phone works, or how information is sent from one place to the other, how telephone signals work. So he was trying to make a mockery, and the boatman says no. And to that, the scientist remarks that, oh, your life is pretty much not worth living. And a certain percentage of your life is really a waste if you don't know these basics. And they go further into the middle of the river or the water body they were trying to cross. And the boatman again asks the scientist what he was reading now, thinking that he must have by now read what he was interested in. But the scientist again makes a mockery of the boatman's simple question, and again asks him a variety of technology-related questions, which the boatman didn't have an answer to. And Again, in response, the scientist makes a mockery of the boatman by saying, well, you're pretty much the entire life that you're living is a waste. Your 75-50% of your life is a waste. So, like this, they continue and they go further. Suddenly, there is a little bit of a disturbance in the water, and it looks like the boat was becoming unstable, and there was a possibility of the boat getting turned. So the boatman asks the scientist this time, "Oh dear sir, do you know how to swim?" And the scientist says, "Well, that's I don't know how to swim because I'm sitting in a boat because it's your job and I'm trusting you to take me from one side to the other." And to that, the boatman remarks, "Oh dear sir, I'm so sorry. Because you don't know how to swim, uh, your entire life is wasted because we have bad weather now and the boat is not able to go across to the shore." And true to his words, the boat capsizes with bad weather and the scientist drowns, whereas the boatman who knew how to swim easily crossed over to the other side. So I'm sure you heard the story a few times, but the takeaways are uh, very, very important. And the message is that if you don't really know what is the true purpose of living these lives that we have been given or we've achieved after so many repeated births and deaths, and we simply engage this life in devising and developing or pursuing objects of sense gratification, then the entire purpose of this life is really a waste, a big waste. That's the takeaway from the story. And that takes us beautifully into the translation of the verse that Prabhupada's very kindly put down for us. I'll read a bit. The purport: the conditioned souls within the clutches of the illusory energy are all anxious to attain peace in the material world, but they do not know the formula for peace, which is explained in this part of the Bhagavad Gita. The greatest peace formula is simply this: Lord Krishna is the beneficiary in all human activities. Men should offer everything to the transcendental service of the Lord because he is the proprietor of all planets and the demigods thereon. No one is greater than he. He is greater than the greatest of the demigods, Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. In the Vedas, Sutashvatara Upanishad, the Supreme Lord is described as Tam Ishwaranam Paramam Maheshwaram. Under the spell of illusion, living entities are trying to be lords of all they survey. But actually, they are dominated by the material energy of the Lord. The Lord is a master of material nature, and the conditioned souls are under the stringent rules of material nature. Unless one understands these bare facts, it is not possible to achieve peace in this world, either individually or collectively. This is the sense of Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna is a supreme predominator, and all living entities, including the great demigods, are his subordinates. One can attain perfect peace only in complete Krishna consciousness. And we can read on a little later. But there are three elements to this verse. And the first aspect is that Krishna is Bhoktaram Yagna Tapasam. Bhoktaram he's the beneficiary of all the yagyas and all the tapasas. Yagya refers to sacrifice, and tapasa refers to the penance and the austerities that we are engaged in. In today's world, we can translate that to not really a fire sacrifice on a daily basis, but all the endeavors that we are partaking in on a regular basis, simply trying to maintain ourselves. The beneficiary of all our sacrifices and all our endeavors is ultimately Krishna. And that's the first point of this verse. He's the ultimate beneficiary of all the sacrifices, all the endeavors. In our pursuit of trying to keep ourselves happy, we are somehow or the other entrapped in this rat race. One intelligent man once said that even if you win a rat race, you're still a rat. And how true. If we continue to demonstrate simply animalistic propensities and do not make use of this faculty of intelligence that's been given to us, and do not question what's the purpose of life, we will continue to behave like the scientists who are simply trying to rescue the dress of the drowning man, and not the man himself. And what does it mean, the dress of a drowning man? If we do not look after who we really are and do not take time to recognize our eternal spirit self in connection with the Supreme Lord, and simply engage in the four basic activities of eating, mating, defending, etc., then we are really no better than animals who are also essentially doing the same things, just in a different way. So the first point of this verse is Bhoktaram Yagantapasam. All our endeavor, the result of all our endeavor and all our sacrifices need to be offered to Krishna. In several places in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has given and emphasized this message again and again as to how important it is to remember this first element of this verse. Krishna is the ultimate receiver of all our sacrifices. And sacrifice doesn't really need to be a massive endeavor. We could engage in very, very simple acts. Krishna is the source of everything. He's Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of all causes. Ishvara Parama Krishna. So in terms of our own ability and capacity, we can't really match what he has and who he is. Therefore, with our own limited ability and capacities, if we just offer the results of all our endeavors to Krishna, then we will be at peace. And the process is detailed in several places in the Bhagavad Gita. It's not even very elaborate, it's very simple to follow. Krishna says in the 9th chapter, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, we all are familiar with that. Even a leaf, flower, or a fruit, the essence is that it should be offered with love and devotion. And the right attitude is to generate or collect whatever we can and make an offering to Krishna as the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices, of all austerity, and all penances that we are engaged in. So, on the contrary, if we were to continue to be in a pursuit of personal sense gratification, we will continue to get frustrated. We will continue to get frustrated if we simply engage in our own personal sense gratification. Because that's the nature of this material world. All our transactions are based on the WIFM principle. What's in it for me? I do this for you, you do this for me. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. So it's a very transactional exchange we have, generally speaking, in this material world. But that's not what Krishna is recommending to have. He is suggesting that we have a loving relationship with him as the benefactor or the beneficiary of all our efforts, all our endeavors, all our sacrifices, and all our austerities. In the Krishna conscious movement, we have several tools. One of the biggest austerities coming up on the 2nd of June, the Pandava Nirjala Ekadashi. Ekadashis, we all know, follow the lunar calendar and have definite benefits of implementing, not just at the bodily level, but the consciousness again, or the idea again, is to observe a day of fasting, abstaining from the daily pleasures we take in different kinds of food stuff, but also utilizing that time that we save in remembering Krishna more, chanting his holy name, glorifying him, reading about his pastimes, etc. So the first point is, instead of focusing on our own sense gratification, we need to divert that and make it as an offering to Krishna, who's understood to be the ultimate beneficiary, ultimate receiver of all our sacrifices and all our endeavors. And there are several places in the Gita where Krishna is confirmed as this to be the right approach. At 927, he says, Yat karoshi, yasanashi, yadjuhoshi dadasiyat. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, ashnasi, whatever you offer, yadjuhoshi, dadasiyat, whatever you give away, do it as an offering to me. Consider me to be the ultimate benefactor. And the Shastras and different commentaries by Acharyas tell us that when we engage in this process of loving exchange with the Lord and take up what is called the devotional practice, the nature of devotional service is that it's not dry. And in trying to give pleasure to the Lord, you or the living being in turn receives pleasure. And that's how it works. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and several other places, the six Goswamis, Rupa Goswami, he's described the six aspects of devotional service, and one of them is Sandara Ananda Visheshatma. Sandara Ananda Visheshatma is an attribute of devotional service, which means it brings incalculable bliss to anybody who's engaged in performing these loving acts. And in several forums, devotee forums, we are discussing the 9 limbs of devotional service and how easily it can be practiced with whatever resource we have in our day-to-day lives without making a lot of adjustments. So that's the first point. The second point, again, very simple to understand, is Sarva Loka Maheshwara, which means the Lord is the proprietor of every thing, inanimate or animate. Everything that exists belongs to the Lord. He's the predominator. I think Prabhupada uses the word predominator in the translation. And that emphasizes the fact that because he's the source of everything, he's the owner, and therefore it's his right to enjoy. He's Sarvaloka Maheshwara. Everything belongs to him, including us. We are part and parcels of the Lord. And that's why we display similar attributes to him. And once we get that understanding, we recognize the fact that an essential element of our lives, the main purpose of our lives is to recognize this forgotten relationship uh, that we have with the Supreme and revive that by simple, practical means laid out in the scriptures. We understand that from the service, and Krishna is explaining time and again. We don't need to make a special endeavor. The process is simple. We just need the desire to be able to partake in it. So the second point is Sarvaloka Maheshwara. Krishna is the proprietor of everything that exists. And it's very simple to understand that there is really it's really very futile to engage in continuous pursuit of accumulation of different a variety of articles that we supposedly think will make our life better and more comfortable. It's really futile to do that. We know that no matter how rich a person becomes or how poor he may be, both the rich and the poor man come to the world in a similar manner and go back in the exact similar manner. So to be engaged in just these four activities, eating, mating, sleeping, defending, and ignoring the real problems of our lives, which is Janamritu Jara Vyadhi, age, disease, old age, and death. If you don't invest time and energy in taking care of the real problems that face us, we will continue to be experiencing this repeated suffering and repeated so-called temporary joy, which is nothing but absence of suffering, really. Even in our daily lives, it's simple to understand. A regular person works hard all day long, 5 days, some people 6 days a week, for some little gratification, either at the end of the day or over the weekend, and then again goes back to work. The amount of so-called enjoyment that we are able to derive from the excess amount of endeavor that we are putting in on a regular basis in supposedly trying to make our life easier is just very disproportionate. And so much brain and so much technology is being used today to take us away from this true understanding of how to attain true peace. Krishna is the beneficiary of all our sacrifices, and he is the proprietor. It's not us. There is an interesting story, I'm sure again many of you would have heard. It's about a thief. He once is presented in the court of Alexander the Great, because he conquered vast areas of land in his time. And the thief is presented in front of Alexander, and Alexander says, okay, what is your crime and why have you committed it? In response, the thief very intelligently replies, oh, mighty Alexander, actually speaking, I belong to the same community as you, and we are brothers, and I'm just like you, really. So I shouldn't really be subject to any punishment. So Alexander obviously was not expecting this response. So he replies or questions, how is that? So the thief intelligently replies, well, I have been um, caught because I stole a little something from somewhere that possibly didn't belong to me. But you are going around stealing kingdoms and vast territories and usurping places and conquering different kings and causing so much killing and destruction. You are possibly a bigger thief than I am. Not all these people are inviting you to come and do the killing and the fighting, but just because you want to, you felt like you're engaging in doing that. So Alexander really thought about it, and the story is that he afterwards comes to India, where by the will of Providence, he gives up his life, supposedly struck by illness. Alexander the Great was such a great king uh, that he was given the title of the Great because he had conquered the entire world. And how did he die? By a small, tiny mosquito, uh, malaria, or something like that. Was the cause of his death. So a very, very rich person and a very, very poor person are also meeting with the same entry and same death. But the important bit is that what do these two people, two types of people, do in between the event of life and death? How do we engage our time and energy and resource in a way that we don't have to deal with the real sufferings of life: birth, disease, old age, and death. Janam, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi. And coming back to the point of Alexander and this thief having this exchange, if we do not recognize the fact that everything belongs to Krishna, and we don't acknowledge that on a day-to-day basis, we are also thieves. This is thief mentality totally, to consider that everything belongs to me. I have labored, I have worked hard, it is my money, it is my house, my children, my family, my possession, my car. That's thief mentality if there is no acknowledgement of the fact that ultimately everything belongs to the Lord. He is the supreme proprietor of everything. Sarvaloka Maheshwara. Sarvaloka doesn't just means India or Britain or Ireland or Europe. Sarvaloka means all the three worlds, including the spiritual world. So we can't even imagine, how far his proprietorship extends. It's best to submit to such a great person. Quite often people refer to the Lord as great. God is great. But very often we don't really understand what greatness of God really is. He's the source of all the Vishnus in the planet, and Mahavishnu in Karanodakshaya ocean is emanating different universes, and then Brahma and Shiva and all the other primary living beings are created, and then all life is being manifested, and Krishna is the source of all of this. So it's very difficult for our tiny brains to understand the greatness of who Krishna is. And if we have even a slightest understanding of this fact, I'm sure we'll not have a problem in submitting to his mightiness, his greatness. And therefore, it's recommended that all our possessions should be used and utilized with a sense of gratitude and acknowledgement that Krishna is a supreme provider. We're not recommending in Krishna consciousness to give up everything. There is a lot of propaganda going on today about giving up Chinese products, for example, because it's funding different kind of unwanted activities, whatever they may be. But instead of getting in these sort of endeavors, a devotee or of Krishna, or who understands who Krishna is, utilizes all that he has at his disposal in the service of the Lord, in trying to make an acknowledgement and recognize the fact that Krishna is the supreme provider, Sarvalokameshwara. Okay. The third point of this verse is Krishna is also Suhridam Sarvabhutanam. Suhridam Sarvabhutanam means he's obviously residing in everyone's heart as the super soul. Super soul is a localized aspect of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But he's the friend and well-wisher of all living entities. And all living entities doesn't mean that he's only friends with ISKCON devotees or only Vaishnavas or Gaudiya Vaishnavas. No, he's friend to not just Indians, he's also friend to Pakistanis or Chinese or whatever nationality or whatever designation they might have. And going beyond that, Krishna is also friend to every living being, 8,400,000 different species of life. Krishna is a friend of all living beings. Suhridam Sarva Bhutanam. Sarva means everything or every living entity is included. Sarva Bhutanam. And someone who understands this is able to really be at peace, not just with himself, but also with the environment, friends, family, and everything around us. And it's a fact. We have some statistics, if anybody wants to see that devotees in today's time are the most blessed people in this current scenario. Yes, there are some devotees who have been impacted by illness, but by and large, devotees are, or let me say, anybody with this understanding is in the best position to deal with this current scenario. We are utilizing as much time as possible, extra time available if there is, in conducting deity worship, if you have an altar in the house, getting together online or however possible in discussing the pastimes of the Lord, exchanging realizations, comparing notes, supporting, encouraging each other to realize that Krishna is one, the beneficiary, the supreme beneficiary of all our austerities and sacrifices. He is the supreme proprietor of everything that exists, and that he is a friend and well-wisher of every living entity. If we recognize and understand this, we automatically become at peace with everything. When we know that the plants and the other living beings are also friends of Krishna, we want to be friends with them as well. There is no question of greed, envy, jealousy, hatred amongst people who have this understanding that Krishna is a friend of all and he's the Supreme Father. And in that sense, we are all, being his part and parcel, children of the same God. So why then engage in fighting or claiming a little bit more of what we already have, and failing to recognize how much is enough, failing to express gratitude to our Supreme Father, and failing to offer all the results of our endeavor to Krishna. In the third chapter, Krishna says about taking prasadam, Yagnishishtashtana Shanto Muchante Sarvakil Vishaya Bhunjate Te Toagam Papa Ye Pachanti Atma Karanat. Means Krishna says, if you're not making an offering of food, whatever you prepare to Krishna first, and then eat prasadam only, you are otherwise only eating sin. Because all activities we do have its own karmic reaction. And this process of devotional service is so beautiful that when we engage in it, when we make an offering of love to the Lord, He takes away the karmic reaction and puts bhakti in that offering, and which then, if we partake, we have a change of heart. So it's said that you can eat your way to Golok Vrindavan, but that eating has to be only Krishna Prasadam, nothing else. There are, of course, strict standards and processes as to how to do that, but very simply, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam, Yat Karoshi Yasharashi, knowing that He's the source of everything. We can experience this in our day-to-day lives. If our children fail to recognize the amount of effort and energy we are putting in to their upbringing, how hurtful can that be? So if we fail to recognize the fact that our dear Lord is making so much arrangement for our satisfaction, how hurtful can it be to Him? And it's in our own interest. Practically speaking, if we don't make acknowledgement to the law of the land and forget or decide not to pay taxes and different kind of levies and duties to the government, what are the consequences? We all know. So it's common sense really to make an acknowledgement of all the gifts of nature and all the facilities that the Lord is providing to us causelessly, without us even endeavoring so much sometimes. Any man with basic common sense would take up to this process of acknowledging the gifts of nature and recognizing the fact that there has to be a process of expressing gratitude to the Lord for providing all that is at our disposal. Remember, the recommendation is not to take sannyas and give up everything. The idea is yukta vairagya, or utilize everything that is at our disposal in the service of the Lord. Use it in a way that it becomes an offering to the Lord. Remain in that consciousness that whatever I am doing and accumulating and endeavoring is an offering to my dear Lord. Your house is a property of your Lord. You're simply a caretaker. Your children are a gift that the Lord has given to you. Your duty to raise them as God conscious. Likewise with your family. And if you don't do all this, then it's just really a waste of time, this life that is passing away with every minute. The sun with the setting and rising, as Prabhupada says, is taking away the life from us. And before we know, we'll be at the end. But any endeavor that we take in devotional service or partaking in this expression of gratitude, simply speaking, to use English, with the loving Lord, recognize His supremacy and acknowledging Him to be the source of everything, the proprietor of everything, the receiver of all the sacrifices, and a friend of all living being, only then our lives will really be in true sense, well, meaningfully led. Otherwise, time is just running like anything. Before we know, it'll be the end. There's no time to lose. There is no time to waste. It has to be done simultaneously. Sometimes people delay taking up devotional service traditionally in India and different parts for a later stage of life. No, that's not the right approach. No. I sometimes have these conversations with my family, my parents, for example, who would often tell me, oh yes, we are at that stage now that we should listen to you. But I'm trying to say that it's not really something only to be practiced at an old age. It takes a lot of practice, It takes a lifetime to come to a consciousness, a stage where we are constantly in remembrance of the Lord. So there is no time to lose. Death is an examination. And when that comes to us, we never know. So we have to constantly in that preparation mode, constantly, with no time to lose. I'd like to end there. I've gone over a couple of minutes. I'm sorry. I'm just going to quickly go through my notes to see if there is anything I missed that I would have liked to share. And in the meantime, we can go to Natraj Prabhu, if you like, open the house for a few questions if anybody has to ask.
So Hare Krishna. So thank you very much, Madhava Kumar Prabhu, for that wonderful detailed explanation about the peace formula.
Yes.
If any devotees have any questions or any comments, they can raise their hand and they can directly speak or type in, whichever is convenient.
Yeah, this I was going to say peace formula. The world is going to pieces really in trying to pursue our own idea about how peace can really be achieved, and our so-called well-wishers are really actually throwing us into the well of this material world, putting us against a variety of suffering. Prabhupada very often, in fact, always used to sign saying, "You're true well-wisher, you're ever well-wisher." So the devotees of the Lord or people who are practicing this understanding are really our true well-wisher. We need to take time to recognize this and hopefully implement the learning in our lives as best as possible.
Thank you. So nobody's asking any particular questions, Prabhu.
Any comments? Anything that anybody would like to add is also okay.
Not a comment, Prabhuji, but I'd just like to welcome our Karshi Chakrabarti Prabhu, who is
Hare Krishna.
Come to our ISKCON Friday class. So welcome, Prabhuji. We're very grateful and very honored to have your association today.
Karshi Chakrabarti Prabhu, Haribol, welcome. He's our neighbor, lives not very far from us here in Sale. Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent. So Hare Krishna, yeah.
Hare Krishna, God Natraj. This is Vamsi Dharidas.
Jai Ho, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Yes, nice to have you here.
Same here. So thank you very much, Madhava Kumar Prabhu. It was a class from your realization. I had one question. When you go out to distribute books or Bhagavatam, how do you correlate this pandemic time with people? What do you say to them?
It's a very relevant question, and especially applicable in today's time. We've, truly speaking, not really engaged in any active contact distribution since the scenario has changed. And we're only reaching out to people who already have some of the other understanding. But we can approach this in a very scientific manner. We can talk about Newton's law, for example. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. I was trying to help my son with his RE homework, where we have to give some analysis of Christianity and Islam. And Islam has a concept of shaitan. And likewise, Christianity has some understanding as well. So we can start by introducing the concept of science as it is, understood by everyone, and the cause and effect or the reaction and action principle, and take it from there. Obviously, people get, in my own experience, very touchy and personal if you were to propose that their loved one who was victim to an act of violence was because he ate a hamburger. It's very difficult to correlate that, but that understanding can be achieved at a much later stage. I think initially you can start by having a scientific, practical discussion, and then depending upon the kind of response you get from the individual, you can take it further. The best, of course, is to present all our scriptures as containing the perfect peace formula, just the way we went through today, and that kind of appeals to most people, and give them the time and the opportunity to read Prabhupada's words that are more potent than anything that you and I may ever be able to say. Yes, if someone's receptive, then I mean, you know it better than me. You're an expert. Then we can keep in touch and build upon that. Is how I would approach this.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so nice. Thank you for the opportunity, Gaurang Trust Prabhu, Radhamohan Prabhu, and all the devotees. I hope it was worth everyone's time. I really look forward to the weekends, Wednesday evening, when we meet as a group, Gaurang Trust Prabhu, and Friday evenings and Sundays. It allows me to connect with the devotees and focus on working on the true purpose, really, as apart from just Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, trying to keep someone happy, thinking that I'm trying to please myself.
Okay, so thank you very much, Madhava Kumar Prabhu, for
Hare Krishna.
enlightening, and His Grace Madhava Kumar Prabhu ki jai.
All glory Shri Guru Shugaranga.
Hari Hari, and we'll see you all again on Sunday. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Jai, jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.